Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Andy Lewis. I am the Executive Director of the Portman Center for Policy Solutions. And the center's mission really is to promote civility, bipartisanship, and to find common ground policy solutions to problems that plague us all. Many days, including today perhaps, the task can feel daunting, but I always tell people that there's a real hunger for something different in our politics, and I think the crowd of people here and the excitement about this event really is proof of that. So we're really glad that you joined us. One of the pillars of the Portman Center is to uplift people of both political parties who model civil discourse and problem solving that our Portman Center really values. For the past year, I've been carrying around in my little notebook a list of some of the great public events that I wanted to have. And at the top of this list was a conversation between Governor DeWine and Governor Beshear. And I'm just thrilled and honored that they came to spend the afternoon with us. As we get started, you can use your program QR code to submit questions. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for audience questions, and this will be the most efficient method, and I will manage those at the end. Before we get started, I'm just pleased to make a couple brief introductions. In a few moments, Selma Yunus, one of our great Portman Center undergraduate student fellows, is going to step up to the stage and give a few introductory remarks. Selma's a fourth-year criminal justice student from Cincinnati, or from the University of Cincinnati, originally from Kettering, Ohio. And before Selma takes the stage, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce President Neville Pinto, the University of Cincinnati's 30th president. He leads the university's strategic direction, which we call Next Lives Here. And fittingly, he has served in higher ed administration in both Kentucky and Ohio. Please welcome President Neville Pinto.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, on this glorious, glorious day. What a great event. How about a round of applause for Dr. Andy Lewis for his leadership of the Portman Center. You know, the secret of leadership in any academic institution is picking the right person. And boy, did we pick right when we picked Dr. Lewis to head this institution. Thank you again for your leadership. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Such a pleasure to see so many familiar faces, so many students, so many supporters of the university, community members, business leaders. Thank you for being here. We truly appreciate this. And I want to first acknowledge our two speakers today, Governor Mike DeWine and Governor Andy Beshear. Thank you for making time to come here today. I know both of you value higher education. I can't imagine what it's like to run a state. I don't know what your calendar looks like from a day-to-day basis. But think about it, for two governors of two major states to make time to come to university, and I know their purpose is to inspire the next generation. It's the focus on students. You are amazing leaders, and thank you for making time for our students today. And my thanks also to Senator Rob Portman. Thank you for your leadership and your inspiration. The Portman Center was founded on a demanding but hopeful idea that public leadership is learned by doing, by listening deeply, disagreeing in good faith, and working across differences to solve real problems. This is the heart of the center, which at its core reflects the approach that Senator Portman applied during his many years of public service. So thank you for your association with the University of Cincinnati. We truly appreciate it. I want to acknowledge local legislative leader who's here today, Hamilton County Commissioner Denise Driehaus. I'm sorry, Denise, thank you for being here. And we have many, many university leaders here today. I will spare us time but thank you all for being here. Former trustees are here, And I believe our current trustee, Steve Boymel, is here as well, so thank you for being here. So, Governor Beshear and Governor DeWine, each of you has consistently prioritized the importance of strong, well-supported universities and colleges as engines of opportunity, discovery, and talent development. Your advocacy reminds us that investing in education is a shared commitment to the next generation. And for Governor DeWine, I want to tell you this: your public university here in the Southwest region of Ohio is at record enrollment, almost 54,000 students. So thank you for all the investments you've made. And our region can attest to both your leaderships as being transformational. We only need to look to the Brent Spence Bridge project, where Governors DeWine and Beshear teamed up, secured billions in funding, and unveiled a bridge design that will serve our region for decades. We can't thank you enough for this and many of the other examples of leadership in the service of the public. To our students in the room, I hope you will apply the lessons you hear today in your own lives and careers. You live in a world that is complex and at times painfully divided. The answer is not retreat, but engagement. I encourage you to engage with intellectual rigor, humility, and respect above all. To everyone in this room, elected officials, community and business leaders, and faculty, thank you for modeling the engagement our democracy requires. Your presence tells our students that courage and compromise can coexist, and that solutions matter more than slogans. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the program.
Thank you, President Pinto. Hi, my name is Selma, and I am one of the 21 Portman Center Student Fellows. First, I would like to thank Governor DeWine and Governor Beshear for being here and having this important conversation with us today. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Senator Rob Portman, who will be moderating today's conversation. Senator Portman is a Cincinnati native who represented Ohio in the United States Senate for 12 years until 2023. Prior to that, he served in 2 cabinet-level positions as Director of the Office of Management and Budget and the U.S. Trade Representative. Prior to that, he served Cincinnati as in the U.S. House of Representatives for 12 years. Senator Portman is known as a bipartisan legislator, with over 220 of his bills being signed into law by presidents of both parties. He was also the lead Republican negotiator in the 2021 infrastructure bill, which helped to fund critical projects such as the Brent Spence Bridge, located right here in Cincinnati. Today, Senator Portman has directed his love of civil discourse and bipartisanship towards the creation of the Portman Center. As a student pursuing a career in law, I have seen firsthand how this program helps to open doors for students interested in leadership, bipartisanship, and civil discourse. So without any further ado, please help me in kindly welcoming Senator Rob Portman.
Isn't she incredible? And what a great representative of our fellows, all of whom are here today, spread out among the audience. I'm so proud of all of them. In fact, why don't all the Portman fellows stand up for us to acknowledge you? And thanks too to Executive Director Andy Lewis, you heard from earlier, and President Pinto, both of whom explained what the Portman Center is all about. You know, we're sort of simple. We just think that people ought to get along and solve problems. Kind of a simple concept, but one that eludes us too often these days. I want to get right into the conversation because we are so delighted to have these two governors with us today. And so let me introduce them, and we'll have an interesting conversation across the river and across the aisle. First, we have with us Governor Mike DeWine. Governor DeWine brings what I think is a very special perspective to our discussion today, having been in public service for 49 years. He hits 50 next year, and we'll celebrate then. But he's also been at all levels of government, local government, state government, and federal government. He, as you know, served as U.S. Senator for 2 terms. He serves as a House member for 4 terms. He also served as our Attorney General of Ohio, Lieutenant Governor of Ohio, an Ohio State Senator, and a county prosecutor. What did I miss, Mike? Oh. I didn't mention he also managed to have 8 kids during that time period with Fran, and has something like 250 grandchildren. Most importantly about Mike, though, is that every one of those jobs that I talked about, he earned a reputation for working across the aisle and getting things done, focusing on his constituents. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike DeWine. Next, we are very pleased to have with us from across the river, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. Governor Beshear is also serving in his 2nd term as governor, previously served as Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And as the son of a former governor, he also has an interesting perspective. As a family member, he has seen different approaches to public service from a very young age. He also brings a nearly unique perspective to our discussion. He's a Democrat who's been able to achieve results in a solid red state by working with Republicans who have a supermajority in both houses of their legislature. He's also been exposed recently to the national scene a little more. Maybe we can get him to talk some about that. We'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Beshear. Okay, here we go. This is going to be fun. First, thank you both for spending time with us today. We really appreciate it. You can see people are delighted to have you. I've really enjoyed working with both of you over the years on projects. Mike and I have known each other for most of that 49 years. I've also watched you. I've watched you handle some pretty delicate political situations, navigate through it, and get results. Promoting common sense and common ground is really what the Portman Center is all about. It's our sweet spot. So we think you're perfect representatives of that, and we're glad to have you here today. I also think it's really important, forgetting what the Portman Center is about, that today, during these polarized times, we have the opportunity to talk about, how do we address it? And I think this sellout crowd today, by the way, we could have filled this auditorium a few times with the number of people who are interested in coming. I think there's a real hunger for it right now, a real interest in finding out, what are the solutions? How do we figure out how to get together and solve problems again? And so with that, let me turn it over to you. I'm going to start with Governor Beshear, and maybe talk a little about your approach and your philosophy of governing, and then we'll have a good discussion.
Well, thank you all for having me. Senator, thank you for your work on behalf of our country. And Mike, I've appreciated your friendship and working with you on so many different things, from Attorney General to Governor. Thrilled to be here today because in these divisive times, we need a reminder that our jobs are not to fight with each other, but to get things done. Certainly as governors, I look at these jobs as common sense, common ground, get results for your people. And I think the way that I've been able to do that in Kentucky is the recognition that most people aren't as partisan as we think they are. That when most Americans wake up in the morning, they're not thinking about their party registration, and they're not thinking about the next election, though we probably are. They're thinking about their job and whether they make enough to support their family. They're thinking about their next doctor's appointment for themselves or their parents or their kids. They're thinking about the roads and bridges they drive each day, the school they drop their kids off at, and whether they feel safe in their community. The way we've been able to make progress in Kentucky is to push out the noise and to recognize that when we work on these things, when we spend 80% of our time on things that matter to 100% of the people of Kentucky or America. We don't move a state to the left or the right, we just move it forward. The idea that the right policies and the right focus can lift everyone up, don't kick anybody while they're down. And the solution to divisiveness isn't everyone should agree with everything I agree with, but it's let's find those areas that we can and should agree on. Because what I say is there ain't nothing Democrat or Republican about a good job. It's just really good for a family. There's nothing red or blue about a bridge, unless we paint it that way. But all of these things are ways that we can support our people, that we can advance our state before we ever have to get to the things that we might disagree on.
Great. Governor DeWine.
Rob, first, thank you for doing this. Congratulations to the Portman Center. Thank you all for being here. Andy, it's always good to be with you. Appreciate it very, very much. We're going to continue to talk about the bridge and actually do things about the bridge.
Yes. Looking forward to that.
We're moving forward. Nothing ever moves as fast as I want it to, or you, but we're coming. So it's good. Rob, I guess I approached the job of governor as I've tried to approach other jobs that I've had, and that is, how can I make a difference? We get involved in politics, we run for office, we do what we do because we want to improve things, we want to make a difference. And I think the job of governor, I've had a lot of different jobs, and this is a pretty good job. It's a pretty good job if you like making decisions, and if you really want to shape the direction of the conversation. It doesn't mean you get everything you want as governor. But I remember a story about Governor Rhodes, who was a former governor, four-term governor of Ohio, and he used to say, I can walk out of my office any day, and this was the days when you had two newspapers in Columbus and two newspapers, morning and afternoon. He's like, see that first reporter and tell him something, and that'll be all over the state in the evening news. And I may not get what I want, but at least I'll have that discussion. And so I think part of the job of the governor is kind of to use a quote from John Kennedy, he said the job of the president is to lay before the American people the unfinished business of the country. I've used that in my State of the State and said the job of the governor is to lay before the people of Ohio our unfinished business. And as Andy said, what gets headlines and what you see on the evening news every night, if you're still someone like I am, it's old enough that I watch the 6:30 news. And, the young people aren't doing that as much. But you'd think that everything is controversial. But what I have found, I have a Republican legislature, and there's been some areas where we've not agreed. But governing is, you govern basically through a budget. We do one every 2 years. And, we've gotten bipartisan support for, we calculated at one time, like 98% of what we put in our budget, the legislature, in a bipartisan fashion went along with. We do agree on basic things a lot more than we think. I think everybody thinks we should do the best job we can to educate our kids. Early childhood education, early childhood development, mental health. There isn't a governor in this country that's not worried about the mental health issues. So these are just common things that we have been able to find a common theme to, and despite maybe some of the issues that you see are headlines, we're agreeing about 98% of the time, and that's not all bad. And we've been able to move forward and deal with the problems. So that's kind of my approach, and I think it reflects again where people really are today when you drill down about what's important in your life, as Andy said.
Yeah. So part of your secret to success is focusing on those issues where you can find that interest and concessions are easier to be made on things like economic development, let's say, or infrastructure. But let's dig a little deeper in terms of your legislatures. Very different situations. Republican supermajority in Kentucky, Republican supermajority in Ohio. But you guys are of different parties. In fact, when Governor Beshear came in today, he noticed that Mike was wearing a blue tie and he has on a red tie.
Bipartisanship.
And A little different approach.
We didn't
I
call
told him,
each other either, so it's fine.
as moderator, I had to wear a red and blue tie. I mean, you know, which is the color of the bridge, I hope. Sorry, getting back to my question. So digging a little deeper, and both of you jump in here, but how do you work with your legislature to come up with solutions in addition to focusing on the right topics? There are some topics that are tougher, and you've got to come up with something that makes sense. Healthcare is an example, education even. What's the secret to success, and where have you failed? You know, where have you not been able to get something done that you wanted to get done? And you know, what did you learn there? Either one of you, Mike.
Well, I think one of the most important things is patience. And that can be really difficult in politics. But I've always believed if one person's yelling and another person starts yelling at them, all you have are two people yelling and nobody can hear a thing. And so it's important in these jobs to recognize that once you're elected, your job isn't to be a Democrat or a Republican. It's to get results for your people. And so if you get really mad about the fight you have one day and you carry it over into the next, you may miss the opportunity when somebody comes to you and is ready to pass that next most important bill or to do that next most important thing. And so I think one of the toughest things in politics is to put your ego aside, but it's so important to actually getting things done. I've signed about 900 bipartisan bills. And I get that I'll have some folks in my legislature that says, oh, just because you signed them doesn't make them bipartisan. And I said, well, if I vetoed them, would it make them partisan? But I think the approach is that word bipartisan is used a lot, and maybe more than it should be, whereas nonpartisan needs to come back into our lexicon. So I've had different opportunities where we brought in a $5.8 billion economic investment. We needed a package passed through the legislature, and most everybody jumped on board. And I remember I had one legislator say, well, what do I say to people that say, well, this will be a win for you? And I looked back and I said, it's a win for you too. It's a win for the 5,000 people that are going to be hired. And don't mess up the single biggest economic investment that's been offered to us. And so I think it's working through all those pieces. And I also think it's recognizing that the best idea isn't always yours. Now, I had a member of my legislature come to me with the idea to invest about $300 million into our career and technical education centers across Kentucky. As manufacturing is changing, as the different skills that are needed in the country are changing, it was just a perfect time, especially in this boom that we were having then of reshoring and of investment. And we grabbed a hold of that, we put it in our recommended budget, it ended up in that final budget. And then it's that people come around. You may have a fight. I remember in 2022, my legislature ended our emergency for the pandemic a little bit early, and it sacrificed $50 million of SNAP benefits, $50 million of food for our people, and I pushed hard. One of the people that cast one of those votes just pushed us to do more in senior meals this time around. So it's trying not to be judgmental. It's trying not to kind of get your hackles up, but always be willing on that next day and the day after to listen, to work with someone, because it's really not about us. It's about the people we serve.
Yeah. To the fellows here, we've talked about this, but you know, one lesson I get from this is, and Mike, you do this well, but don't burn your bridges. You can get pretty upset with a fellow legislator or a governor and you know, carry that grudge, but that's going to be your champion the next time around. And that's certainly true in the legislature in Washington. And also sharing credit, which you talk about, really important. And Ronald Reagan used to say, I don't care who gets the credit as long as it gets done. Mike, thoughts you have on how do you work with the legislature, and you've been very successful in getting things done?
Well, I think, Rob, the most important thing, and I'd say this to all your scholars out there, I think the most important attribute of someone who is in public office is to be a good listener. You know, many of the things that we have been able to do weren't originally my ideas. They came from somebody else. It came from a private citizen. Sometimes it came from my staff. Sometimes it came from the legislature. You know, so being able to listen, I think is very, very important. And you know, I had the experience of, as you did, Rob, of 12 years in the United States Senate. And so you and I both operated in a body where getting 51% of the vote was not enough.
Yeah.
You had to get 60. And so everything that we did was everything I wanted to do. And I started every legislative session with an agenda, just as I do as governor, and Andy does. We all have our own agendas. But I knew that I had to get support on the other side of the aisle. And so what I found is that you could find common ground. You know, if I had an issue of one of the things I care a lot about is foster care. Jay Rockefeller was the person I went to on foster care. He was also the person that I went to on highway safety. Chris Dodd, Democrat from Connecticut, if it was a children's health issue, that's who I went to partner with. Dick Durbin on AIDS issues. So, you know, you figure out who cares about these issues. And in dealing with the legislature, you also figure out who cares about a particular issue. And you try to see where they are, you know, what do they care about? And you then try to come up with something that, you know, everybody can, maybe not everybody will agree with it, but at least the people who care about it in the legislature, that you can work out something. And, you know, you don't get 100% of what you want. That's not the way our system was designed, so you're not supposed to get 100%, as much as I'd like to get 100%. But if you can get a lot of that and move the ball forward and advance that, you know, that's what I learned in the U.S. Senate, and that's the way I've approached the state legislature.
All great pieces of advice, being an active listener and spending more time listening than talking, and working with people that have shared interests and holding them up. And not everybody's, you know, got all the ideas, so you listen to other people for their ideas, all great. We're in the middle of the shutdown, and I know there's interest in this room as to, you know, how we're going to get through it. I always get asked, you know, how much longer will it go? And it's a tough one to answer because it is quite divisive right now, and there's some bad blood between the parties. But thoughts about the shutdown, how it's affecting your states, and you know, any advice you would have for your colleagues in Washington, D.C. on this?
Yeah, I think when we look at the shutdown, we're looking at two things that at least grab me. Number one, we're looking at a lot of families that aren't getting a paycheck, that work for the federal government, many of them going to work right now. You know, I just flew back through CVG and talked to a lot of the great people in customs and who are working at that airport. And they're worried about the next payments they have to make for their mortgage or for their electric bill. And we need, regardless of where you are on the shutdown, we really need to think about them and make sure we're also prioritizing them. On the other side, things cost so much right now. So many families are barely getting by, and if healthcare premiums go up the way that they're predicted to go up, so many people won't make it. But the thing in politics that I've always pushed back on is everything is pushed in this like diametrically opposed choose A or choose B type of proposition. They need to do both, right? They need to both extend the dollars that go into decreasing the premiums on the exchanges and thus keep premiums down on the private market, and they need to open back up the government. But right now we've got this partisan clash where, again, a win for one is a loss for another, when ultimately doing both would benefit the American people.
Governor?
You know, I think, Rob, if a person does not work for the federal government at this point, there are many people out in Ohio and across the country where the shutdown is kind of background information or noise. But the further you go along, it's going to impact more and more people. You know, you're going to have, unless something changes at the beginning of the month, you know, there's not going to be money for SNAP. Right. There's not going to be money for WIC. Something that, you know, we think WIC, for example, is very, very important for moms and making sure the baby is thrives. So these are important things, and when you see those stop, when you see it impact air traffic control or the security people there, you know, the further this goes on, it's going to get to a point where the pain is very, very clear, and I think at that point, maybe there's a resolution. I don't know, but it's going to fundamentally change in the next several weeks.
There are so many other topics to address, but one I want to touch on is our cities. And both of you have, vibrant cities that are a significant part of your economic growth in your states. And yet we have a public safety concern in our cities. And the National Guard is being called up, as you know, in certain cities. And this has become a controversial issue. But could you talk a little about that? Talk about public safety generally and what the solutions are, and then more specifically, what do you think about having National Guard units go to these cities?
Yeah. Well, first of all, every one of my big city mayors is a Democrat. And that was true, obviously, during COVID. Every single day at 11:30, I was on the phone with every big city mayor in the state of Ohio. Why? I wanted to tell them what we were going to do at the 2 o'clock press conference, but I also wanted to hear from them, and more importantly, hear from them what is going on in their city. What are they hearing? And so that, that's not a partisan issue. It's not Democrat, Republican. What's going on? So, to specifically, Rob, answer your question, Ohio, like many states, is a very local government state, and our services are really delivered locally, and whether that's at the county level, or whether that's the city level, or the village level. And so these mayors are obviously very, very important as far as the delivery of these services, as are the county commissioners and others. So one of the big issues that we talk a lot about, and you referenced, is crime and great concern. So we tried to figure out, even though we're a local government state, we do not have a state police. We have the highway patrol, but they're not a state police. How can we help the local cities? And we've come up several years ago, actually shortly after I became governor, we came up with a plan where we can bring the highway patrol in to work with the local city, with the local police. We can also bring some other state departments in. The liquor control, for example, can come in to focus. What they can do is they can focus on people who are literally going into bars that we know are hotspots, and they can identify whether these individuals who are going in, frankly, are convicted felons who aren't supposed to have guns anyway, and may have a gun on. We also bring the state parole people in, so we can surge into the cities. That is the most effective thing that we can do from the state to help deal with the crime problem. And we have seen remarkable results where we surge in. And we're not in there every day. We surge in for 2 or 3 days and target the repeat violent offenders. The facts are that the vast majority of violent crime in this country today, in Ohio and across the country, is caused by a very, very small percentage of the criminal element. And you simply have to target them, and you have to go after them. The most effective way to do that is with law enforcement people who are trained to do that. And so that's why when people say, Governor DeWine, are you going to send the National Guard to Cincinnati, or you're going to send it to Cleveland? My answer is, that is not, they have a role. And I have sent the Guard into different cities in Ohio. When the mayor asked us to, and we had an agreement, this is the best thing to do. They were for civil disturbances. There are natural disasters. You had some of the same ice we did a few years ago, and we sent the National Guard down into southern Ohio to, frankly, just clear the roads from all this stuff. That's what the Guard can do. So I look at this as, what is the most effective tool to go deal with the crime problem? If it's a crime problem we're talking about, most effective is get other law enforcement agencies involved to help the local cities. That's kind of how I approach it. The Guard has a real role. It just, if you're dealing with crime, the role generally is, best role is the police officers and related to the criminal justice system.
Yeah. Governor Beshear.
Well, I think all of our people both deserve to be safe and to feel safe. And right now, you can point to different statistics and say violent crimes going down in most places, so people may be objectively safer. But if you don't feel safer, there's still more work to do. Because if you believe mental health is just as important as physical health, then that feeling is valid. then it means that we have to do more. But decreasing crime and making people feel safer is hard work that can't be solved by a stunt. You know, bringing the National Guard, and I completely agree, who are not trained in law enforcement, into a city or into a state may decrease crime in the week that they're standing there, but isn't going to do anything long-term to make people safer. Instead, it's things like we do have a state police, we raised our salaries, we have the most state troopers in over a decade that are out in our communities. They are trained to fight and reduce crime. We are working on reducing recidivism, teaching skills inside of each of our prisons, because while we might not be able to stop that first crime, we can give people the tools so they don't commit that second, third, or fourth crime. We're working to intervene with our youth before they get into crime, or when they're in that system. Those are the actual steps and work that you have to do, the hard work, if you want to reduce crime over time. And let me just, this is important to me. The National Guard of one state should never be sent to another state where the governor does not want them and objects to them. If that is the case, if a president has a power to do that, we are not 50 states anymore. I think it is a really important issue that's out there right now, and it should be more than about just picking a fight with this or that. And remember, crime isn't red or blue, but the use of the Guard in states that do not want them, that have said no to them, and are working as hard as they can to decrease crime, just shouldn't be happening. But I will say, one of our colleagues, J.B. Pritzker, made a statement that has a little bit of nuance on it that I think is being lost. He said, send me all the FBI agents you want. Send me all the DEA agents that you want. Send me all of those federal law enforcement officials that do have that training. And we will work together to try to reduce crime in the short and in the long term. But you know, our guardsmen in Kentucky, they're not professional soldiers, though they are trained. They are not professional law enforcement. They are welders and CPAs. They're our neighbors. And when they are called to do something like this, they got to leave their family. They've got to leave their job. And then they're put in a position that they're not trained for, that they are not necessarily safe in. And so I feel very strongly about this, and I would feel just as strongly if the president was of a different party and this was happening a different way.
Okay. So we're going to jump now to just this broader issue of civil discourse. I mean, I'm inferring from what you guys are talking about that governors probably have the ability to teach the national legislatures some stuff on how to get things done, because you have no choice. You've got to have a balanced budget. You've got to work with your legislators to get things done, and you've both been pretty successful.
If you don't get results, you're not governor anymore.
That too. You got to get reelected. And that's one of the issues, I think, is that in Washington, you can get reelected without getting something done, as long as you're throwing out the red meat to one side or the other. But let's talk about what the National Governors Association is trying to do and get your views on that. They're trying to come up with more ways to encourage civil discourse, as I understand it, nonpartisanship, to use the governor's term, and they're focused on stopping, the partisanship that is acrimonious and even political violence, which unfortunately we've seen more and more of. What do you all think about that? Where does change start? And are changes to the electoral system, to those earlier comments about how you get reelected, are they part of the answer here? Just go ahead, Governor.
Well, I'd distinguish a little bit in the National Governors Association as a unit that I think ought to be speaking out on the Guard issue, and Spencer Cox, who's our current head of it. Spencer had a lot of courage after
He's the Republican governor of Utah.
He is the Republican governor of Utah, of how he spoke out after the Charlie Kirk killing. He called for unity, which is what we're supposed to do in these situations, and even with some pressure, he kept doing it. And I think part of what we need to do in civil discourse is, in addition to pointing out where we disagree, let's give people credit when they're doing something that we think is right. Even if they're of another party, even if they're going to be up in another election, let's use positive reinforcement when they're doing something that's good. Certainly the way that I deal with our current president is the only way I think you have credibility. When I disagree with him, when I think his policies hurt the people of Kentucky, I speak out. I try to make it not personal, but about that issue. But when he does something that has been positive towards my state, I want to say that too. The flood response, especially in February of this year, was the best I've ever seen FEMA operate. And we've had 14 federally declared natural disasters in Kentucky in the last 5.5 years. And you know, when that happens, it generates a different conversation the next time. It means that you can have a good relationship with someone, or a better relationship with someone, even though you may disagree on a lot of things. But let's give each other a little bit of credit, especially when we think somebody's doing that right thing.
You know, Rob, I think one of the things that Governor Cox has emphasized when people really listen to him is that we're not saying give up your principles. In fact, you need to keep your principles. You need to know exactly what you want to accomplish. So sometimes I think people hear him or hear somebody, maybe even they'll take away from this discussion today, well, those three guys up on the stage, they think we should just, you know, compromise everything, and they don't really care strongly about those things. Well, I can tell you, I know Andy does, I know you do, and I do. We know what we think. We know what our basic core principles are. So that, I think, is sometimes a misconception, and that people just say, well, you know, how do you guys give up your principles? It's not that you're giving up your principles, it's you're trying to figure out how you can actually take those principles and achieve something positive that you want, that you think is right. You don't change what you think is right, but you do that. And you know, you went through that yourself, you know, with the infrastructure bill. You know, there's probably, I won't speak for you, but I'm sure there's parts of that infrastructure bill you may not have liked, but you understood what impact it would have. You know, but for that, we would not be building a bridge across the river. So I just think that's an important distinction. Is how you implement your principles. And if you have a standoff and nothing happens, you're not implementing your principles.
Mike, I think that's very astute. And earlier, Governor Beshear said we should hold up people who are doing the right thing. This institute, 3.5 weeks ago, had a meeting where we brought in a Republican senator and a Democratic senator. One was from a very blue state, Ben Cardin, and he's a good liberal. One is from a very red state, West Virginia, Shelley Moore Capito, who's a good conservative. And we held them up as examples and chose them on purpose, Mike, for the exact reason you just said. This is not about being a moderate. Nothing wrong with that. But this is about sticking to your principles. And these two individuals do that every day, even though they represent a very blue state and a very red state. But their attitude about government is to get things done and to make incremental progress toward their principles and their views. And so I think you're absolutely right, and there's a misunderstanding out there that somehow you need to be in the middle of the road. That's where the skunks get run over, right? And that's fine if you want to be there, but the more important thing is that everybody ought to get elected to public office with the attitude that you both have talked about here today.
And it's important that our leaders don't see the world just through a red or a blue lens. Because if you do that, suddenly everything good that happens in the world must be and can only be pushed by one party. And something bad must have been pushed by the other. What we see, or what I see, is both candidates and leaders who see the world that way just aren't as effective. I mean, I'll give you an example. Lately, I found myself agreeing with Rand Paul on a couple of things. And probably a couple of years ago, I would have said, who'd have thunk? But if you're really looking at the issues, wanting to get those results, and what you believe is right, or even with your convictions, when suddenly you realize somebody you thought you disagreed with on everything, you agree with with a similar conviction, right? You don't have those colored contacts on. and all of a sudden you see different areas that you may be able to work together on, and I think you see that other person as a little more human. I think one of the biggest threats that we have in our government and to our society right now is the dehumanization of the other side. Now, if you walk out in your neighborhood and you turn around and you look at the street, there's going to at least be a couple houses that the people are registered in a different way. But you don't want them to do poorly, you want them to do well. They're your neighbor, unless they put their grass clippings on your lawn. And you want their kids to do really well. For me, it's that driving golden rule that we love our neighbor as ourselves, and the parable of the Good Samaritan that says everyone is our neighbor. We've got to stop, and I know Governor DeWine agrees with this, we've got to stop depicting the other side as the enemy, because they're not. Yeah. They're human beings. And if we want to get things done, moving forward, the answer is never, well, everyone has to come to our side. It's that we've got to find that common purpose. And it's a lot easier when you view that person on the other side as a real human being.
I think also, yeah, you're right. Getting to the point where you actually sit down and are actually talking about a particular issue. I mean, it's one thing, we live by a lot of sound bites. Everybody watches the TV that sort of agrees with them, whether it's MSNBC all the way over, to Fox. And so we're kind of pulled apart based on that. But if you actually have to figure something out, which is what governors have to do and what legislatures have to do, when you actually have to figure something out, we have this objective. And you usually can come up with, we have a common objective. We may have a different way of getting there. But those discussions, what you find out is, yeah, there are some common things we have in common. And our basic, what we care about is the same. I mean, who doesn't care about kids? Yeah. Who doesn't think we should be educating kids the way we can? And we can argue about how best to do it, but there's just so many basic things that we all do agree on, and we should at least admit it. We do.
We filed those opioid lawsuits together as AG.
Yep.
Trying to hold accountable companies that ultimately pushed out so many pills that we lost far too many kids and family members and friends. And I remember now West Virginia's governor, you and I were together as attorney generals trying to make sure that no one saw this as a partisan issue. It was just the right thing to do. And I think that's an example of how I think all 50 states, or almost all of us, came together knowing that something was important and wasn't red or blue at all.
One of the few issues in Washington over the past decade that I've been involved with where we were able to keep people together is on the opioid crisis. And unfortunately, it's a rare thing these days to figure out how to keep it from becoming a red or a blue issue. And as was said here, there's always some overlap here, and that's where you have to take advantage of it. Before we turn to the audience questions that Andy has lined up from the electronic questions you all sent, one more, and this goes to the fellows who are here and the other students who are here, and there are lots of them. What inspired you to get into public service, and what advice would you have?
I'm sorry, what?
What inspired you to get into public service in the first place? This I know it was a few years ago for you, so you're going to have to think back on it. After having every job in Ohio.
Look, I think the advice I have always to young people, and I always hesitate to give advice, but we do, right? We give advice.
Yeah, they want to hear.
What we say to our kids, but you run for office or you get involved. You don't have to run for office. You can be involved, obviously, in public policy in many, many different ways. And part of the challenge is figuring out, am I someone who wants to run for office, or do I want to be working for somebody who runs for office? Do I want to do research on something? Whatever you like to do best. But everybody can contribute to changing public policy. But the only real reason to do it is you want to change something. You want to make things better. And despite, I think I've been a good governor. I'm sure Andy thinks he's been a good governor. You were a great senator. But there's still always work to do. There's always work to do. And we sort of I had it when I was in the U.S. Senate, and still have this, and I still talk to my staff this way. We had kind of what we call a but-for test, and something would come up, and we say, are we going to get involved in this? Are we going to go put some focus on it. And if somebody else was going to do it, it's going to happen. Well, I don't have time to go work on something that's already going to happen. Let's go try to get involved in something that we can actually change it, and maybe our contribution will really push it forward. To me, that's always the test, and that's how you get involved in public office. Because if you get involved in public office just because you want to be in office, you're going to be very disappointed. Yeah. Your life is not going to be very happy.
Great advice. Governor?
I got into politics based on two events that happened in my life. I never planned on it. My work was supporting my dad, who'd always wanted to be governor. He'd lost a governor's race in 1987 when I was 10 years old. And the thing I remember is he spent all night telling me it was going to be okay. He taught me a lot about being a great dad that night. But 20 years later, as a young lawyer, I was able to help him run in a race that he shouldn't have had a shot, and he won. And I did more free legal work for that man in that election. And I thought the most important thing I do that touches politics would be helping a dad achieve a dream that he thought was dead. But one day we're going to a meeting, and we're in an elevator, and a woman walks on, and she bursts into tears. And she looks at my dad and says, "I wouldn't be alive today but for you." The Affordable Care Act had passed, he'd implemented it, he'd expanded Medicaid. She'd had cancer. And her insurer said it was a pre-existing condition. Cancer was somehow a pre-existing condition. She had no coverage, she couldn't get any of her treatments. But those laws go through, he as governor were able to implement them. She was alive and cancer-free in that elevator, and that has stuck with me ever since. The other event is the birth of my children. It changed my life. People said the birth of your kids would be a miracle, and I thought, yeah, it was. I never questioned my reason for being anymore. I never lacked for purpose, though they are both teenagers right now, so please pray for me. But I looked at them, and I thought about this woman in the elevator, and I just kept asking myself, am I doing everything I can to create the best world possible for them? Simply working in a law firm, being financially successful, is that the best thing for them? Is that going to create the best world for them? And so when I had a chance to run for Attorney General, I did, and I've never looked back. And what I'd say to each of the fellows and anybody else is find your why. Find that thing that drives you. Find that thing that makes it worth getting up and running into a wall over and over and over because you know one day that wall might fall. And you're willing to do it because your why is that important. If you do it for the title or just because you think it's interesting, these jobs are tough. And they can eat you up. And a lot of people have been unsuccessful because of that. But if you find that core thing that drives you, whether it's in politics or in any other type of work, you'll find it really satisfying. And you'll be able to let the negative parts go a whole lot faster, a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Great advice from both of you. Thank you. Andy, questions from the audience?
Thanks for submitting them. A lot of great questions. I think one of the questions that are showing up the most are about higher education. So we're sitting at what we think is a great institution of higher ed, but higher ed has found itself in the middle of polarized times. And there's a lot of legislation about higher ed. There's executive things coming from the federal government. But what's your vision of higher education in these polarized times? How would you make statements about the importance of institutions like the University of Cincinnati?
Look, I think Ohio is, I tell people, and it's true, Ohio is blessed. We not only have 14 great public institutions, but we have over 50 private colleges in the state of Ohio. We are a net importer of college students. So it is a great asset from shaping the community where the college is into a better community, a more vibrant community, to educating the young people who go to college. Our goal in Ohio, frankly, is to keep as many Ohioans in Ohio as we can and attract as many from out of state to stay here. And let me just mention a couple things that we have done. I asked the legislature, and they agreed on the last two budgets to take the top 5% of students from every high school in the state, public, private, everything from Ripley, Ohio to Cleveland. If you're in the top 5%, you get a $5,000 scholarship on top of any other scholarship you've got from the state of Ohio, and you get that for 4 years, so it's $20,000, and you can pick any college in the state of Ohio, whether it's public or private. Here's what happened with that. We were getting 60% of those kids, that cohort of top 5%, about 60%. The first year we put it into effect, we went to 75% that went to Ohio schools. The next year it was 85%. And so every year that remains, and we hope future legislators will keep that, we're going to get more and more of those kids who go to school in the state of Ohio. Second thing we've asked our universities to do, and I didn't have to ask President Pinto here, because UC has done this and done it probably better than any place else, and that is a work-study program, internships, whatever you want to call it. If the college is focused on making sure, no matter what the major is of that student, that they have some hands-on work in that particular industry with a particular company. Frankly, most of those companies are going to be in Ohio. Some are going to be in Kentucky, coming out of here. That's okay. But again, if they work there, what you're going to see is a lot of these young people are going to stay at that particular business. And again, that's going to keep more. So we look at our universities as a great, great asset. And sometimes what we're hearing in the media is this debate about college versus career tech versus other things. The truth is, we have to have it all. We absolutely have to have it all. And Andy was talking about putting more money in his career tech. We did the same thing. Fran and I were out, and I think between the two of us and Lieutenant Governor Houston, we were at almost every career center in the state one year. And it was so exciting to find these kids who said, look, I hated school until I came here, but I love what I'm doing now. That was the good news. The bad news was when we asked, is there a waiting list to get in this school? Many times the answer was yes. Is there a waiting list to get into this particular course of study? The answer was yes. And so we asked the legislature to put $300 million more into that to expand that. So we have to do it all, but we certainly have to have our universities. Rob, the last question that we were asked when we were trying to keep Sherwin-Williams in Cleveland, and they were doing a nationwide search, the last question they asked us, and we're almost there, they said, how many PhDs in chemistry does Ohio produce? Well, guess what? We produce a lot of them, and UC is one of the places where that occurs. So we got to do all the above.
Yeah, economic growth as well.
Well, I want to thank UC for hosting us. You've got a great president in Neville. I'd like to think we trained him a little bit at the University of Louisville, but got to work with him some at that point. And this is an institution like Kentucky ones that people from around the region go to. And the answer is they all need to be strong. It benefits people on both sides of the state. First, I fully agree with Governor DeWine that our goal should be that every kid has a path. Now, I think they should get to choose their path, and at some times in their life, they should be able to move between paths. Education and opportunities should never end. They should always be available. To those students that want to go into the workforce earliest, we need the best programs to get them the best skills so that they can earn a real living that first year out. That's what we should want for our kids. And we should also be tying those to the future economies that are out there to make sure that, especially in an age of AI, that these are skills that are transferable and where there will always be a job available for them. With that said, a four-year university like this one and so many others is so critical for not just our states, but for the country. The training of these incredible minds that are here today, not just in some topic, but to be critical thinkers and to be problem solvers, is needed in every business, is every infrastructure project, and every challenge that government faces. And so I think an institution is a great one when they truly train people to think. Now, I think right now it's really important that we stand up for the independence of our institutions of higher education. Yes, we can say we disagree with this or that, something has gone too far, but it's really important that government not impose its current beliefs and force universities to do certain things. I also think the research done by our universities is so critically important, and we shouldn't be funding it less, we should be funding it more. I mean, I think about the days that we have the kids with cancer that come to the Capitol to push for state funding, which is the only meeting I say yes in during the meeting for a budget request. No parent should ever be told there's nothing more you can do, that there's no treatment, that there's no cure, that there's no hope. We've got to be making sure in this area and so many others that we are continuing that important work. I think about the miracles of medicine that have happened in our lifetime. I think about what that CRISPR technology can do that's out there right now to take things that are genetic that used to be incurable and make people not only well, but fully cured. We are at this moment where we may be able to provide this amazing breakthrough, and we shouldn't be doing cuts that slow that down or make it less possible. So I think, again, this should be, and I think is amongst most people, a nonpartisan issue. That our universities, their research, everything that they do is really important, as well as those career paths too.
So well said. I wish we had another hour, but we don't. And let me just say, finally, with regard to higher ed and University of Cincinnati, you know, we do a lot of research here, second only to Ohio State in Ohio, and including medical research. And it's also a school that believes in ideological balance. And I think that's something universities have to face up to around the country. The fact that President Pinto and the faculty and the board supported the Portman Center is an example of that. Not only that I happen to be a Republican, but we're a place where all views are welcome.
Yeah.
And everybody should feel that their First Amendment rights are protected and that they have a balance here on campus where people don't feel intimidated and to express those views. And I think that's true here. And I hope it's true, you know, increasingly at universities all around the country. You two have been fantastic. Let's give them a round of applause, please. I would say I leave this session more hopeful. I think it's refreshing to hear these two talk about how they work together and how they work in their respective states with members of the other party. And I think they've given us some great examples to take nationally and also some great advice for our Portman Fellows and other students who are here. Thanks again, guys, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Andy.
See you, Mike.